Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a topic that really, it affects the core of global civilization. Wheat. I mean, it is the undisputed original global staple. And when you look at the numbers, they're just staggering.
They really are.
We are talking about the crop that provides a crucial 20% of global daily protein and calorie intake. For 40% of the entire human populace, wheat is, the reliable source of daily energy.
Yeah.
Yet here's the paradox. Wheat sits firmly on the Big Nine list of major food allergens.
Right.
And this tension between, global necessity and individual danger, it creates one of the most pressing public health dilemmas in food science today.
That tension is the perfect starting point for this deep dive.
Right.
Wheat is essential, yes, but for a growing population, it's a source of immediate, potentially catastrophic allergic reactions.
Right.
And we're not just talking about minor inconvenience here. The clinical urgency is very real. I mean, symptoms can range from the mild, like localized flushing and angioedema, all the way up to systemic life-threatening anaphylaxis.
Where the whole body just shuts down.
Exactly. The whole body shuts down. And addressing this means a two-pronged attack. First, we need diagnostic tools precise enough to identify the specific culprits. And second, we need food scientists to innovate, finding ways to fundamentally reduce the allergenic potential of the wheat itself through some pretty groundbreaking processing methods.
Absolutely. Our mission today is sort of custom-tailored for anyone who needs to quickly become an expert in this challenging area. We've pulled together recent clinical allergy reviews and food science research to structure a really comprehensive view. We are going to break down the core science of wheat proteins, identify those highly specific molecular markers, the ones that go way beyond the simple, often unreliable total wheat IgE tests, and then we'll spend a good amount of time exploring the 8 distinct cutting-edge techniques currently being investigated to transform wheat into a safer, hypoallergenic food source for millions. So to begin, I think we have to appreciate the sheer concentration of protein we're dealing with. The mature wheat grain contains anywhere between 8 and 20% protein by weight. And the key is that almost all of it, nearly 86%, belongs to the gluten protein family.
And that high concentration is what gives wheat its unique textural properties. The ability to form dough that rises and holds its shape, but it's also the source of the problem.
Right.
Within that complex structure of gluten, we have 2 major families of grain storage proteins, and understanding their molecular differences, it's essential to understanding the allergy.
Okay, so let's break down those 2 structures.
Certainly. First, you have the glutenins. These are the polymeric proteins.
Meaning they're made up of many repeating parts.
Exactly. They're large, complex structures made up of many repeating subunits. They are stabilized by very strong chemical bonds, specifically both inter- and intramolecular disulfide bridges. Think of them as the framework or the scaffolding of the gluten structure.
Providing strength and elasticity.
That's it. They provide the strength and elasticity.
And the second major family.
Those are the gliadins. And they're the monomeric proteins, meaning they exist mostly as single units rather than in these long chains.
Okay.
Their structure is stabilized by less rigid bonds, primarily hydrogen bonds, and intramolecular disulfide bonds. They contribute more to the viscosity and extensibility of the dough.
So here is a key insight that just jumps out of the research immediately. While both are necessary for gluten, the sources confirm that gliadins generally possess a higher inherent allergenicity compared to the glutens. So why does that monomeric, that single unit structure, make them the greater allergic risk?
Well, it really relates to how easily they are accessed and how frequently the immune system encounters their specific epitopes. The gliadins, being more flexible and less rigidly bound, are often more available to the immune system early in the digestive process.
They're the immediate bad actors.
They are the immediate bad actors. This differentiation is precisely why food scientists focus so heavily on neutralizing the gliadin fraction when they're attempting to make wheat hypoallergenic.
And we can refine this understanding even further, right? By classifying these proteins not just as gluten or non-gluten, but by their solubility.
Which often predicts their role in the plant and, crucially, their allergenic potency.
Yeah.
That's the classic 4-part classification system. The total wheat protein mass breaks down like this. We have the non-gluten proteins, first albumins, which are water-soluble.
About 10 to 12% of the protein mass.
Right. And globulins, which are saline soluble, and that's under 15%. These are often associated with enzymatic activity in the grain.
Okay.
Then we have the two major gluten components, glutenins, which are acid soluble and form the bulk, about 45 to 50%, and gliadins, which are alcohol soluble at 30 to 40%.
So we have these 4 solubility classes. If all 4 can cause an allergic response, how does the literature stack them up in terms of real-world allergic potency?
The hierarchy is actually quite clear. All 4 classes are documented as being capable of eliciting an IgE-mediated skin reaction. However, the descending order of potency established in the literature is gliadins are the most potent.
No surprise there.
No surprise. Followed by glutenins, then the albumins, and finally the globulins.
So that just reinforces the initial insight about gliadins being the main trigger.
Absolutely. And if we drill down even further, even within the gliadin fraction, the specific structural group cited as the most potent triggers of allergic reactions are the alpha-beta gliadins.
Which we'll get to.
Yes, we'll talk about their specific nomenclature, Triad 21, in a moment. But this level of granular detail, it just shows why using component-resolved diagnostics rather than simply a test for wheat is so critical for an accurate diagnosis.
Let's talk about that IgE mechanism itself, because that's the process that leads to the immediate, scary reaction anaphylaxis. What's happening inside the body when it first decides a wheat protein is a dangerous enemy?
It's a classic immune sensitization pathway. It starts with the first encounter. So when cells like dendritic cells encounter the wheat allergen, they present it to naive T cells. This communication primes the system.
Right.
And it instructs B cells to start mass-producing IgE antibodies. And these are highly specialized antibodies targeted only to that specific wheat protein.
And these IgE antibodies are then positioned for maximum damage.
Maximum damage, exactly. They circulate briefly, but they quickly settle down and become fixed onto the surface of immune sentinel cells, primarily mast cells and basophils. These mast cells are essentially primed bombs, just loaded and ready to detonate.
So the next time you're exposed.
The next time the body is exposed to that wheat allergen, even a tiny amount, the allergen acts as a bridge, cross-linking the IgE molecules that are fixed on the mast cell surface.
And that's the trigger.
That's the trigger.
Duh.
This cross-linking signals the mast cell to rapidly degranulate, releasing a massive wave of pre-stored potent chemical mediators, histamine, leukotrienes, prostaglandins. These are the chemicals that flood the system, causing the immediate symptoms like the swelling, the blood pressure drop, and the constriction of the airways that characterizes anaphylaxis.
It's a remarkable and frankly terrifying biological cascade. But the clinical presentation isn't limited to just ingesting the allergen, is it? We have to consider the different exposure routes.
Precisely. The outcome is fundamentally shaped by how the allergen enters the body. For ingestion, we see the typical immediate food allergy profile, urticaria, which is hives, vomiting, and of course the potential for anaphylaxis.
But the research really highlighted a massive problem in occupational settings, the inhalation route.
Yes, for inhalation, we see the severe occupational diseases, specifically Baker's asthma and rhinitis, which is essentially allergic inflammation of the nasal passages.
And this is common.
It's highly common among workers in the food industry. Bakers, millers, pasta makers, who are exposed to high concentrations of airborne wheat flour dust for hours, every single day.
The numbers for those occupational diseases are genuinely shocking.
They are. The incidence of Baker's asthma is reported to be between 1 and 10% of the entire baking workforce.
Wow.
For rhinitis, the rate is even higher, ranging from 18 to 29%.
So nearly 1 in 3 people.
Nearly 1 in 3 people working in a flour-heavy environment is dealing with chronic, debilitating respiratory symptoms linked directly to the wheat dust. And most of those affected didn't even have prior asthma, which shows it's the prolonged high-dose exposure that sensitizes them over time.
So wheat becomes a massive occupational health hazard, just hiding in plain sight.
Exactly.
And the third, less common route is just skin contact.
That's skin contact, which is responsible for contact urticaria. This often involves specific robust allergens, like Triad 26, one of the high molecular weight glutenins. For most people, this is localized, to the hands or forearms, but it is another clear manifestation of the immune system recognizing the protein as dangerous.
Now let's pivot to 2 specific, often misunderstood clinical entities that fall outside the common food allergy category. The first one is wheat-dependent exercise-induced anaphylaxis, or WDEIA. This condition, it sounds like something out of a medical thriller.
It does. WDEIA is fascinating because The trigger isn't just wheat, and it isn't just exercise. It's the specific combination of the two.
Right.
Anaphylaxis only occurs if the individual ingests wheat and then engages in intense physical exercise. Without the exercise component, they can often eat the wheat safely.
And the timing is key. It's not instantaneous.
Correct. The anaphylaxis usually occurs within 1 to 3 hours of ingestion, but that window can extend up to 6 hours later. It tends to affect teens and adults most frequently. And the complication for clinicians is that affected individuals often don't have a prior history of typical food allergy. So they might suddenly develop this severe, unpredictable reaction, which demands extreme vigilance and proper diagnostic follow-up focused on the specific molecular trigger, which we'll cover in a bit.
And finally, we have the non-IgE-mediated reactions, which they just throw out the entire rulebook for diagnosis because they are driven by cells, not immediate antibodies.
That's the eosinophilic gastrointestinal diseases, or EGANs, primarily eosinophilic esophagitis, EOE, and eosinophilic gastritis, EG.
Okay.
These are characterized by chronic inflammation, T-cell infiltration, and a massive influx of eosinophils, a type of white blood cell, into the lining of the esophagus or stomach. The sources are absolutely clear. Wheat is a major trigger, particularly of EOE.
And it's a completely different mechanism.
It's a whole different ballgame. Unlike the immediate IgE responses, which we understand well, these are complex, delayed, Th2-driven cellular inflammations.
Yeah.
And crucially, the standard diagnostic tools relying on IgE testing completely fail to identify the trigger. This is a chronic, painful condition that requires a completely different diagnostic path.
So we know how the body reacts. Now we need to name the specific molecules responsible. The WHO-IUAS Allergen Nomenclature Subcommittee has essentially given us a detailed roster of these bad actors in the wheat grain, labeling them with the TRIA prefix.
Exactly. This official nomenclature is critical for advancing diagnostics and research. They've identified 28 distinct wheat allergens, ranging from TRIA 12 up to TRIA 45. They are categorized based on their physical properties, solubility, and their primary exposure route.
Food versus airway.
Right, food versus airway. And to avoid overwhelming everyone with 28 names, let's focus on the absolute biggest culprits.
That's a wise approach. Let's start with the one most famously associated with that strange phenomenon, WDEIA.
That is omega-5 gliadin, or TRIA 19. It is one of the most clinically important proteins. It's a major storage protein, a sizable molecule at 65 kiloday. And the literature confirms its strong association with both WDEIA and severe immediate IgE-mediated food allergy. If a clinician is struggling to diagnose WDEIA, IgE antibodies specifically targeting TRIA 19 are the definitive marker.
So for WDEIA diagnosis, you are looking for that specific marker, sometimes paired with another one.
Correct. Measuring TRIA 19 IgE, often alongside the high molecular weight gluten, TRIA 26, significantly boosts diagnostic accuracy for WDEIA. Furthermore, the molecular structure of TRIA 19 is key. Its major epitopes, the actual binding sites recognized by IgE, are rich in proline and glutamine sequences, which are resistant to degradation.
Like that PQQQF, PQQQQQF sequence.
Exactly, that 100 PQQQQF, PQQQF109 sequence. These repeating, robust sequences are what the immune system latches onto.
And what about that partner in WDEIA, the high molecular weight gluten?
That's TRIA 26. At 88 KIA, it's a massive storage protein. While TRIA 19 is the more specific marker for WDEIA, TRIA 26 is another major structural component that contributes to the unique pathophysiology of this exercise-induced reaction.
So these are both insoluble proteins that often require the physical stress of exercise to become
fully accessible to the immune system in a way that causes a massive reaction.
Yes. Now let's move to the second group. The proteins that are notoriously stable, meaning they survive cooking and digestion, making them persistent irritants, often associated with respiratory issues.
This brings us to the water and salt-soluble proteins, which are fundamentally different from the gliadins and glutenins we just discussed. The most dominant example here is the nonspecific lipid transfer protein, TRIA 14.
A small protein, right? Only 9 kilodeo.
It's small, but it's a powerful allergen implicated in occupational diseases. Studies have found specific IgE antibodies against TRIA 14X in up to 60% of patients with Baker's asthma.
Wow. So why is this tiny protein such a huge problem, particularly for stability?
Because of its structure. TRIA 14 exhibits extremely high resistance to both heat and pepsin degradation. This is crucial for its role as a food allergen. It means that when you process wheat baking it, boiling it, and when you eat it, the protein survives the industrial kitchen and it survives your stomach acid.
So it retains its allergenic potential all the way into the small intestine.
All the way. It can cause sensitization or trigger reactions there. Its stability makes it a major target for any processing method aiming to reduce allergenicity. I mean, if you can degrade TRIA14, you've won a big battle.
Next, we have a whole family of inhibitors, the AAIs.
Yes, the alpha amylase trypsin inhibitors, which include TRIA15, 28, 29, and 30. These are multifunctional proteins in the plant, and in humans, they are common allergens involved in both Baker's asthma and sometimes anaphylaxis.
And they share that same heat resistance.
They share that critical characteristic with TRIA14. They are highly heat resistant. What makes the AAI family particularly useful diagnostically is that they lack significant cross-reactivity to grass pollen.
Wait, let's stop there and emphasize that. Why does the lack of grass pollen cross-reactivity matter so much in the clinic?
Because, as we'll discuss in detail later, many people sensitive to grass pollen show a positive IgE test to whole wheat. It's a false positive that doesn't cause clinical symptoms. But if a patient tests positive for IgE against an AAI like TRIA28, it's much less likely to be irrelevant cross-sensitization. It strongly suggests a true primary allergy to a wheat component. This is a critical factor for allergists trying to separate the signal from the noise.
The sources also point to a specific protein, TRIA37, that seems to predict the severity of the reaction.
That is alpha-pyrothionin, or TRIA37. It is a plant defense protein, similar in size to TRIA14 at 12 kilasa. Like the others in this group, it is highly stable and resistant to both heat and digestion.
Okay.
What makes TRIA37 deeply concerning, even though it's recognized by only about 20% of wheat allergic patients overall, is the fourfold increased risk of severe allergic symptoms associated with IgE antibodies against it.
A fourfold increased risk of severe symptoms. That moves it from a diagnostic curiosity to a clinical imperative, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. If a clinician sees IgE responsiveness to TRIA37, they should treat that patient differently. This patient isn't just someone with mild hives. This is a patient who should always carry a self-injectable epinephrine device. And who requires the most stringent adherence to avoidance protocols. It acts as a specific biomarker for predicting the risk of severe anaphylactic reactions.
Finally, let's quickly cover the structural gliadin subtypes that are still highly relevant for general ingestion reactions.
Right, we need to acknowledge the rest of the gliadin family. Alpha-beta gliadins, so TRIA21, are key. They are 2835 kidney-day proteins, and they are molecularly significant because they are exceptionally rich in those problematic proline and glutamine sequences.
Those heptapeptide and pentapeptide motifs.
Exactly. They resist full breakdown. And studies suggest that adding TRIA21 to standard specific IgE panels significantly improves sensitivity for diagnosing true wheat allergy, especially in complex cases where TRIA19 might be negative.
And gamma-gliadin.
Gamma-gliadin, or TRIA20, a slightly larger 35-38 kidney-day protein, is another player. Research, particularly in adult-onset wheat allergy cohorts like those studied in Thailand, highlighted TRIA20 as a major allergen, and is also linked to WDEIA cases.
To round out the molecular profile, we have the LMW glutenin, which seems to combine the worst traits of stability and immune recognition.
That's low molecular weight glutenin, or TRIA36, at 40 kilo a day. TRIA36 is incredibly prevalent, recognized by a huge proportion, about 80% of patients with wheat allergy.
Wow.
And why is it so troublesome? It exhibits the dual resistance we discussed earlier. It's heat resistant, similar to TRIA14, and crucially, continuously releases IgE-specific epitopes, even during simulated gastrointestinal digestion.
So it survives both heat and the stomach.
It survives both heat processing and stomach acid, making it a significant and persistent food allergen that researchers are very keen to neutralize.
Okay, we've established that wheat allergy involves a complex family of 28 proteins, each with varying levels of heat resistance and clinical presentation. Given this complexity, it is now perfectly clear why using generalized testing methods like skin prick tests or total serum IgE assays for wheat just fails the clinician.
It really does.
Can you elaborate on why this non-specificity leads to such high false positive rates?
It's a major problem of signal versus noise. When clinicians use a whole wheat extract for a skin prick test or a bulk serum IgE assay, they are testing the response to all 28 proteins and dozens of others simultaneously. The immune system is incredibly broad in its reactivity, and the data illustrates this failure perfectly. In one study of children with suspected wheat allergy, almost all the kids who had an immediate clinical reaction tested positive on the SPT.
Okay, that makes sense.
However, approximately half of the children who were clinically non-reactive, meaning they could eat wheat safely every day, were also SPT positive.
That's a coin toss for a diagnosis. You are sending a family home with an avoidance diet based on a test that is wrong 50% of the time.
Exactly. The specificity of the whole wheat SPT was a dismal 55% in that cohort. Furthermore, if you rely on total serum IgE levels, the amount of specific IgE required to predict a true clinical response with 95% certainty is extraordinarily high, up to 80 kUl.
That high.
That high. And that cutoff is necessary precisely because so many people have low levels of wheat-specific IgE due to cross-sensitization, which is clinically irrelevant. You need an overwhelming response to declare true allergy.
So the diagnostic community had to pivot, moving away from the bulk approach to component-resolved diagnostics, or CRD. How does singling out the individual try-a-family components dramatically improve the accuracy?
CRD transforms diagnosis by ensuring that a positive result correlates with a known allergenic mechanism. Instead of measuring general reactivity, we measure reactivity to tria-19 or tria-37. This shift allows us to differentiate true clinical reactivity from irrelevant sensitization.
And which specific component stood out as the most powerful differentiator in the studies you reviewed?
One component in particular, the dimeric AAI 0.19, an alpha amylase inhibitor, emerged as a stunningly accurate differentiator.
Okay.
This specific component showed a high positive likelihood ratio, or LR plus ratio, of 6.1 to 6.80.
For our listeners, can you quickly explain what a positive likelihood ratio tells us in practical terms?
Sure. A likelihood ratio tells you how much more likely a patient is to have a disease if their test result is positive. An LR plus of 6 means that a positive test for dimeric AAI 0.19 is 6 times more likely to come from a child who experienced an immediate reaction during an oral food challenge than from a child who was non-reactive.
That's a massive jump in clinical utility.
A massive jump compared to the general wheat IgE test.
It sounds like CRD helps move us from a single binary yes-no answer to a more nuanced dashboard of risk.
It does. And the overall pattern of sensitization matters immensely, not just the individual components. The severity of immediate reactions, so those severe enough to need epinephrine, was strongly linked to IgE responsiveness to both gamma-gliadin and H&W gluten and subunits.
And the research also quantified the cumulative risk, didn't it?
It did, and this is perhaps the most actionable finding in the diagnostic literature. Researchers found that positive IgE responses to 5 or more different specific wheat allergens significantly improved diagnostic accuracy for predicting immediate symptoms, yielding an LR plus of 5.9 CO.
So we are moving from asking, are you allergic to wheat, to asking, which 5 or more dangerous wheat proteins are you reacting to?
That's it. It dramatically changes the clinical relevance of a blood test and allows clinicians to quantify risk with much greater precision.
That's a huge leap forward. Now, let's tackle the biggest source of confusion and false positives in all of allergy diagnosis: cross-sensitization. Wheat is biologically related to pollens and other cereals, and that can trick the immune system.
This is a major area of misunderstanding. Wheat contains proteins that share structural homology with allergens in grass and Timothy grass pollen, as well as cereals like rye and barley. The most frequent overlap is with grass pollen.
Okay.
Sensitization to wheat-specific IgE is highly common among individuals who are sensitive to grass pollen. In some cohorts, the rate of co-sensitization between grass pollen and wheat pollen was as high as 78%.
But the key here is that for the vast majority of these people, this reaction is clinically irrelevant. They have a positive test but can safely eat bread.
Precisely. It is irrelevant cross-sensitization. The body's immune system, primed by the pollen, sees a similar-looking protein structure, a homologous protein in the wheat grain, and generates an antibody response. But that antibody response, on its own, is insufficient to trigger an actual clinical food allergy reaction when wheat is ingested.
So clinicians need to be careful.
Very careful. You don't want to unnecessarily restrict the diet of a patient who has a positive wheat IgE, but only suffers from hay fever.
Now, let's look at a cross-reactivity that is highly clinically relevant.
Yeah.
The relationship between wheat and barley.
This one is serious. The research indicates that wheat, specifically that highly allergenic omega-5 gliadin, tria-19, is the likely primary source of sensitization.
Okay.
Once the immune system is primed against tria-19, it can lead to secondary sensitization to barley because there is significant sequence homology between omega-5 gliadin and barley's gamma-3 hoarding.
So the barley protein looks enough like the wheat culprit to trigger the same immune response. And what are the clinical implications for a patient who is allergic to wheat and then potentially to barley?
The clinical impact is considerable. especially in pediatric populations. Studies show that half of wheat-allergic children reacted clinically to barley.
Half of them. Wow.
And we have predictive markers for this too. A lower wheat oral food challenge threshold dose, meaning they react to a very small amount of wheat, combined with higher omega-5 gluten-specific IgE levels, were strong predictors of clinical barley allergy.
And there was a specific number for that SIC-E level?
Yes, an omega-5 gluten SIG-E level of greater than or equal to 4.6 kUAL strongly predicted the need to also avoid barley. This means management requires counseling patients on multiple grain avoidance, which, as you can imagine, significantly complicates their diet.
Before we move into the solutions, the processing pathways, we have to circle back to the toughest diagnostic challenge, those non-IgE-mediated diseases like EOE. If CRD is so powerful for IgE reactions, why is it virtually useless for EOE?
Because the mechanism is different. EOE is a cellular inflammation driven by T cells and eosinophils, not the immediate antibody cross-linking we discussed earlier. Therefore, the traditional IgE measurements, SPT, or serum-specific IgE for wheat, they show little to no sensitivity or specificity in predicting which patients will actually respond to an elimination diet.
So you can have a high wheat IgE and not have EOE triggered by wheat, or have a negative IgE and wheat is still the culprit.
Exactly.
So for EOE, the gold standard remains a trial and error elimination diet, followed by a physical inspection of the esophagus.
It does. The gold standard remains a multi-step clinical procedure. It requires an intensive elimination diet, often removing the 6 major triggers, including wheat, followed by time to heal, and then an endoscopy, an EGD.
And the endoscopy has to show that the disease is gone.
It has to show histological disease resolution. Specifically, a biopsy showing less than 15 eosinophils per high-power field in the esophageal lining. You have to remove the food, wait weeks or months, and then physically scope the patient to prove that food was the cause.
It's lengthy, invasive, and requires extraordinary patient compliance.
It really does. And the difficulty of EOE diagnosis highlights why simply fixing the food source is such a desirable scientific goal.
That's the perfect transition. We've established that diagnosis is complex, and management relies on strict avoidance and emergency medication. If we can't easily diagnose or cure it, the next logical frontier is fundamentally changing the wheat protein itself. So we are now going to explore 8 distinct processing pathways currently being investigated to make wheat hypoallergenic. Let's start with the oldest and simplest tool in the food scientist's kit: heat treatment.
Heat treatment is appealing because, well, every bakery already uses it. Its primary mechanism is thermal denaturation. High heat changes the protein's complex 3D structure. Think of straightening out a tightly wound spring.
Okay.
This structural change accomplishes a few things. First, it physically masks or destroys the allergenic epitopes, making them unrecognizable to the IgE antibodies. Second, the denatured structure is much more susceptible to degradation by our digestive enzymes.
So it breaks down more easily.
Much more easily. And finally, high heat encourages protein aggregation, forming large clumps that are too big to effectively contact or cross-link immune cells.
It sounds like a great solution, but why isn't standard baking enough? What are the inherent risks of just using more heat?
Well, standard baking is often insufficient to fully degrade the most robust epitopes, like the cores of Tria-14 or Tria-36. To achieve sufficient allergen reduction, you often need high temperatures applied over long periods, which severely impacts the texture and nutritional quality of the food.
Right.
But the biggest caveat is the risk of producing glycation end products, or AGEs.
What are AGEs and why do they pose a problem?
AGEs are formed when sugars react with proteins under heat, the browning reaction, like on a crust. These new chemical structures can actually serve as neoepitopes, brand new allergens the immune system has never seen before.
So you're creating new allergens.
You're potentially increasing the overall allergenicity of the food.
Yeah.
And they have also been shown to disrupt the intestinal barrier, which promotes the allergic immune response. So heat is a double-edged sword. You might destroy the old allergens only to create new ones.
Moving from thermal to chemical modification, let's analyze acid treatment.
Acid treatment utilizes chemical reactions to dismantle the protein structure. It works primarily through peptide bond hydrolysis, simply breaking the long protein chains into smaller fragments. It also uses deamidation, which chemically alters amino acids like glutamine and asparagine, fundamentally changing the sequence and destroying the original epitope structure.
Okay.
Furthermore, introducing acid causes the wheat protein to approach its isoelectric point, making it unstable and promoting the formation of insoluble aggregates that physically encapsulate the remaining epitopes, shielding them.
That sounds aggressive. What are the specific dangers of using a strong acid on food proteins?
The dangers are twofold. First, some epitopes, particularly in the gluten family, are already quite acid tolerant, so that limits the treatment's overall effectiveness.
Right.
Second, and more concerning, aggressive hydrolysis significantly decreases the molecular weight. You are left with very small peptides. And these smaller fragments can sometimes enhance the allergen's ability to penetrate the skin or intestinal barrier.
So by making the allergen smaller, you might be making it easier for the body to absorb it and amplify the immune response.
Exactly. So the process of hydrolysis must be controlled with extreme precision to avoid that adverse effect.
Next up is enzymatic hydrolysis, which is a more biologically targeted version of breaking down proteins.
This is a favorite method in food science. It employs specific proteases like pepsin or trypsin or industrial alternatives to cleave peptide bonds selectively. This breaks large proteins down into simple, non-allergenic small peptides or even individual amino acids.
And the key is destroying both the linear and the 3D shape epitopes.
Right, both the linear and the conformational epitopes. And when the resulting peptides are small, they are easily absorbed by the digestive system, reducing their contact time with the immune cells in the intestinal lining.
It sounds like it should be the perfect solution. So what are the limitations?
Well, while it offers strong targeting ability, it isn't foolproof. The literature shows that enzymatic degradation may not completely break down the most highly folded enzyme-resistant cores, such as the core structure of that persistent respiratory allergen, TRIA14. So you end up with residual allergenic capacity. The other challenge is purely sensory. Extensive hydrolysis often produces bitter peptides, which can ruin the taste of the food and require further treatment before the product is consumer ready.
The fourth pathway, fermentation, seems to integrate that enzymatic activity, but in a more natural, traditional food processing context.
Fermentation is incredibly promising because it's a method consumers trust. It's natural, safe, and it usually improves food flavor and texture, think sourdough bread. The mechanism relies on microorganisms, primarily lactic acid bacteria and yeast, which naturally secrete proteases.
So they're doing the same job as the pure enzymes.
They're cleaving peptide bonds and destroying epitopes, similar to the pure enzymatic method. However, fermentation adds a secondary benefit. The production of lactic acid enhances the overall protease activity and promotes protein denaturation and aggregation.
Does fermentation offer any benefits to the body beyond just degrading the allergen?
Yes, and this is a major advantage. Fermentation products may also positively regulate the gut microbiota and, crucially, enhance the intestinal barrier function.
A stronger gut barrier means fewer large protein fragments can leak through.
Exactly, which reduces the likelihood of sensitization or reaction.
What's the cutting edge in fermentation science for allergen reduction? Is it single culture or multi-strain?
Multi-strain fermentation is consistently shown to be more effective because the cultures provide a wider array of proteolytic enzymes, achieving deeper and more comprehensive hydrolysis. For example, co-culturing Pediococcus acetylactice XC31 with yeast was shown to reduce gluten-induced damage to the intestinal cell monolayer more significantly than using the LAB alone.
But I'm guessing it still has the same problem with those really tough epitopes.
It does. We have to reiterate that, like the pure enzymatic method, fermentation may still cause incomplete degradation of those notoriously resistant epitopes, like the core of TRIA14.
Pathway 5 is entirely different. It involves incorporating natural compounds like plant extracts through polyphenol modification.
This is a very elegant solution. Polyphenols, which are compounds found in things like berries, green tea, or grape seeds, reduce allergenicity primarily by forming stable complexes or conjugates with the wheat protein.
So they bind to the protein.
They bind in two ways: through non-covalent bonds, like hydrogen bonds, or through covalent reactions. These reactions effectively mask and disrupt the epitopes, making the protein physically unrecognizable to the IgE antibodies.
So it's a physical masking strategy. Does it have any effect on the immune system itself?
Yes, which makes it a superior approach. Polyphenols, when ingested, are known to inhibit allergic reactions downstream by blocking the Fc-epsilon-RI signaling pathway in the mast cells and reducing the overall release of inflammatory factors like histamine.
So it's a two-pronged approach. It disarms the allergen and calms the immune system's reaction to it.
Exactly.
That sounds like a dream solution. Natural, safe, and nutritional beneficial. What's the catch?
It is excellent. It's natural, safe, offers strong specificity, and provides nutritional enhancement due to the polyphenol's powerful antioxidant capacity. This antioxidant capacity can also help block the formation of those neoepitopes generated by oxidative stress.
But there has to be a trade-off.
The trade-off is often purely aesthetic and sensory. The binding of polyphenols can cause unwanted changes, particularly leading to food color issues, like browning and unwanted flavor profiles, such as astringency. For a mass-market food, those sensory characteristics are crucial.
We shift now to physical processing methods, starting with number 6, high-pressure treatment, or HPP. This is a big industrial technique.
HPP is appealing because it's a non-thermal method. It works by applying tremendous hydrostatic pressure, sometimes tens of thousands of atmospheres, which disrupts the non-covalent bonds holding the protein's secondary and tertiary structures together.
So it's like squeezing a sponge so tightly that its internal structure changes shape.
That's a great analogy. This physical force causes protein denaturation and aggregation, which successfully masks or disrupts the allergenic epitopes without using heat or chemicals.
What are the main selling points of HPP in an industrial setting?
There are major advantages. It preserves nutrients and flavor exceptionally well, as it doesn't degrade vitamins or flavor compounds like heat does. The processing time is also short, often just minutes, making it suitable for continuous, high-volume industrial production.
But I imagine the equipment needed to generate that kind of pressure must be incredibly expensive.
It is the primary drawback. The capital investment for the necessary high-pressure machinery is substantial, leading to high energy consumption and processing costs. Additionally, there's a risk of over-treatment, where too much pressure can actually deteriorate the texture of the product, leading, for example, to the loss of desirable dough elasticity.
So you have to find that sweet spot.
Exactly. Enough pressure to reduce allergens, but not so much that the bread is inedible. That's the engineering challenge.
The 7th method is similar in using physical force, but relies on sound waves.
Ultrasound. Ultrasound primarily decreases allergenicity through the cavitation effect.
Yeah.
When high-frequency sound waves pass through the dough or protein solution, they cause rapid formation, growth, and violent collapse of microscopic bubbles.
A microscopic sonic boom.
Essentially, yes. This collapse generates an intense localized pressure waves and strong shear forces. This physical force rips apart the complex protein structures and cleaves sensitizing peptide chains. It also generates reactive oxygen species, which induce oxidative cross-linking or cleavage of proteins.
That's a powerful mechanical mechanism. Does it share the industrial advantages of HPP?
Largely, yes. It has a very short processing time, lower overall energy consumption than high-pressure processing, and it preserves color and flavor. However, ultrasound has a major technical limitation. Its penetration depth is constrained.
So it only works on the surface.
It mainly affects protein solutions or surfaces. Its effectiveness is limited when trying to treat thick dough or dense, solid food products, constraining its use primarily to liquid or semi-liquid wheat-based products. And similar to heat, if the parameter is not perfectly controlled, the generated oxygen species can induce unwanted oxidation, potentially creating new, unintended allergenic epitopes.
Our final pathway, number 8, is irradiation.
Irradiation involves exposing the food to ionizing radiation, typically gamma rays or electron beams. This strong energy reduces allergenicity through two main effects. The minor effect is the direct alteration of the protein structure by absorbed energy. But the major mechanism is the generation of free radicals caused by water ionization within the food.
And these free radicals attack the proteins.
They're highly reactive and they attack the proteins, causing structural changes and destroying epitopes.
This method offers significant industrial advantages, I assume.
Yes, it offers strong permeability, allowing it to treat thick products effectively. It has a short processing time, seconds to minutes, and is suitable for large-scale, continuous production. Plus, it avoids the need for chemical additives.
What are the primary concerns that prevent this from being a simple, universal solution?
There are three main issues. First, it causes detrimental changes to the food itself. It can cause lipid oxidation and the loss of essential vitamins, notably vitamin B1 degradation. Second, the scientific results are inconsistent. Studies show conflicting outcomes. Some doses decrease allergenicity, while others, even on the same protein like gliadin, have been shown to elevate allergenicity.
So it's not reliable.
It suggests the effect is highly dose and target-specific. And the deep structural folds of some epitopes can also exhibit strong radiation tolerance.
And the third issue is just public acceptance, which is often a major hurdle for irradiated foods.
Precisely. Consumer acceptance of irradiated foods is generally quite low due to long-standing misconceptions. This necessitates compliance labeling and extensive market education. The industry needs to overcome a major marketing and public relations obstacle, even if the science shows it can be effective for allergen reduction.
This deep dive has truly illuminated the complexity of wheat allergy. It is not just one sensitivity. It's a clinical reality driven by a complex roster of proteins with specific culprits like TRIA19 for WDEIA, TRIA14 for respiratory issues, and the severe symptom predictor, TRIA37.
And that leads to the first crucial takeaway. Clinical practice must shift entirely to component-resolved diagnostics. Relying on general wheat IgE or SPT testing is highly unreliable.
Right.
The dimeric AAI 0.19 provides far better clinical relevance, and the risk quantification provided by checking responsiveness to 5 or more specific wheat allergens is invaluable. Furthermore, the clinician must be aware that high omega-5 gliadin SIGE levels accurately predict clinically relevant cross-reactivity with cereals like barley, complicating dietary management.
Currently, patients are managed through strict avoidance and the rapid, necessary use of self-injectable epinephrine. But looking ahead, the scientific momentum on innovative processing is, well, it's thrilling.
It is. While medical solutions like oral immunotherapy or OIT are heavily studied, they carry risks, including the potential to induce non-IgE-mediated diseases like EoE in susceptible patients. And this makes the advancement of processing techniques like fermentation and polyphenol modification, which are safe, natural, and offer ancillary health benefits, absolutely critical. They offer the genuine promise of reducing the allergenic load at the manufacturing stage.
Potentially making controlled wheat consumption possible again for allergic individuals without relying solely on risky medical interventions.
That's the hope.
So, we know that some allergens are resistant to heat, some to digestion, and others are just structural fortresses. Given that we need to create a universally safe wheat product that still retains its nutritional value, its iconic elasticity, and appealing flavor, what combination of these 8 distinct reduction methods, the enzymatic, the chemical, the thermal, and the physical, will ultimately be necessary to finally solve this global public health paradox? That combined approach is the ultimate challenge for the next generation of food science.